What's going on, guys? Today I'm bringing you some Call of Duty Ghosts gameplay on the PlayStation 4, and I wanted to discuss my opinions and thoughts, even though those are kind of the same thing, on Call of Duty Ghosts and Battlefield 4, how I think they go up against each other, which one I prefer, and I'm going to give you the reasons behind all that. So let's get started. So first off, Battlefield was never really I don't want to use this phrase because I feel like it's just something that I shouldn't ever say, my cup of tea. And that's because in previous generations, on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360, the Battlefield games ran at 30 frames per second. And if you don't know what that means, it basically means that there are 30 frames of video every second that the game is running. And in comparison to Call of Duty on the PS3 and the Xbox 360, that was very low. It was cut in half in comparison to every Call of Duty title since Call of Duty 4, with the exception of some frame rate drops in Call of Duty World at War and Call of Duty Black Ops 1. And I really loved the 60 frames per second aspect of the Call of Duty games. It made the game feel really smooth, and although they had to sacrifice graphics for the frame rate, I thought it was a pretty good trade, because not a lot of games on the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 ran at 60 frames per second, so Call of Duty was always kind of at the top of my list in terms of priority of which games I wanted to play, which games I wanted to buy. And I know that's kind of closed-minded, and I shouldn't have been that way, but 60 frames per second is really a deal breaker for me, because if a game isn't running at 60 frames per second, then I feel as if I'm sort of out of control. I don't know if it's a mental thing or if it's actually true, but when I'm playing Battlefield 3 on the PlayStation 3, I feel like the controls in the game just aren't as responsive as they are in Call of Duty. And I know that's another thing that Call of Duty kind of nailed on the head back in Call of Duty 4, was the responsiveness of the controller, or the controls rather, not the controllers, but yeah, that's kind of why I stuck to Call of Duty, is because the 60 frames per second. But the thing is that now that the new generation of consoles has officially been released, and they've been out for a little while now, I know that there are going to be a lot more games coming out that run at 60 frames per second, as well as having amazing graphics. And for example, Battlefield 4 has done this. They have astonishing visuals in the game on the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One, as well as the capability to run the game at 60 frames per second at all times. And I personally have not experienced any frame rate drops in-game, which is amazing, especially considering how new the game is. But I do know that there are a lot of issues in Battlefield 4 in terms of hit detection and all that stuff. But personally, for the most part, my experience has been really solid on the new consoles, except for the fact that every once in a while when I'm playing Battlefield, I don't know if this happens to any of you other guys who play on PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, the game crashes, so hopefully they get that sorted out. I kind of expect the games to not run as well as they did in the previous generation because it's a new console, and they haven't really nailed it on the head as to how they can optimize their games for the new consoles, because it's new technology. They're not as familiar with it as they were with the PS3. And if you think about it, the PS3, when it first came out, had a lot of issues in terms of games. I had the PS3 when it first came out. Well, not really. I got it a month after it came out, and there were still a lot of issues. I remember having a lot of games crashing. I had Marvel Ultimate Alliance. That was my first PlayStation 3 game ever, and I remember that there were a lot of glitches, and visually it wasn't very appealing, which kind of excites me because I know that as the PlayStation 4 ages, the developers are going to have more experience and do a lot more amazing things with the technology within the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One as time moves on. So that's pretty exciting, because right now, even at launch, the graphics for some of the games are amazing, and I know that they're only going to get better, and I'm very excited for that. So as soon as they kill off the PS3, stop making games for it completely, I know that that's when the developers will be able to take full advantage of everything within the PS4 and the Xbox One in terms of power. So hopefully they don't make the PS3 stay for as long as they did with the PS2. I think they kept making PS2 games once the PS3 came out for about 2.5 years, I'll say, around there. Because I remember seeing commercials for new games coming out, and it was like 2008, and they still had the PS2 logo at the bottom of the screen at the end of the advertisement saying that the game was going to be coming out for the PS2, which kind of sucked because it kind of limits them in terms of what they can do with the game, because they have to port it down to the previous generation of consoles. But kind of getting off topic, this video was the purpose of this video was to compare my opinions about Call of Duty Ghosts and Battlefield 4. So in terms of gameplay, 64 players in Battlefield 4 is really awesome. And I know that the PC has had this for a while because they have a lot more power on their PCs than the consoles did in the previous generation. And they still do have a lot more power than the current generation, meaning the PS4 and the Xbox One. So they're always going to have an edge up against consoles, which kind of sucks because I wish that consoles would kind of show PC players that they're fucking boss. And I'm not disrespecting PC players. I really hate when people are like, oh, don't buy a fucking console, get a PC. Like, what if I don't want to get a PC? I'm not comfortable with playing with a mouse and keyboard. It kind of just throws me off. It makes me feel like I'm not playing a video game. I just can't imagine myself doing that. So no disrespect to you guys. All props to you for being able to aim and shoot shit with your mouse and keyboard. That's extremely difficult for me, and it probably is for a lot of other people. But yeah, I feel like consoles are a more ideal thing for me. I don't know about you guys, but that's just my opinion. But the 64 player modes, I think there's only one actually, it's Conquest. That's the only one that I've played. Is really fun when it works. Sometimes there are audio drops, sometimes I lag out of the game or the game crashes like I said. But when it works, the 64 player Conquest is really fucking fun. There's just action everywhere, and a lot of people think that Battlefield is a really slow-paced game, but you haven't really experienced true Battlefield until you've played 64 player Conquest, because it's fucking insane. And that's something that really puts Battlefield 4 on top of Call of Duty Ghosts for me, because of the fact that Call of Duty Ghosts has some pretty large maps in for Call of Duty standards at least, and the Ground War only has 9 players, which is a huge issue for me, because I thought when I was playing PS3 that I heard that the standard modes that were 6v6 on PS3 and Xbox 360 were going to be moved up to 9v9 on the next generation consoles, and that Ground War would be moved up to 12 versus 12, because it only made sense because of the fact that the maps were so big, and I was wondering why they were so big. But I kind of thought that maybe they were going to bump the amount of players up for the next generation of consoles, but I was wrong, I guess, and it sucks because even on Ground War, the amount of action in Call of Duty Ghosts multiplayer is still pretty minimal in comparison to previous Call of Duties, which fucking sucks because Call of Duty is all about that fast-paced action. Now, this map that you're watching right here, I forget what it's called, but this map is pretty fast-paced. I'm playing Ground War, and for me, Ground War really saved this game because on the PS3, I got really bored of playing 6v6 because it's just so damn slow. You find someone every minute. Whereas in Battlefield 4 Conquest with 64 players, you'll run to one part of the map and there will be 12 guys and it's just chaos and it's really fucking cool. So that is something that has put Battlefield 4 far ahead of Call of Duty Ghosts for me. And obviously, one of the other big things that made me prefer Battlefield 4 over Call of Duty Ghosts this generation were the graphics. And I know that the graphics on PS4 aren't as good as the PC graphics, but for console graphics, the graphics in Battlefield 4 are absolutely beautiful. And Call of Duty Ghosts, I was actually pretty surprised about the visuals in Call of Duty Ghosts when I put it in my PS4, because they're really good for a Call of Duty game, but they have absolutely nothing on the Battlefield 4 PS4 graphics. So that's just, Call of Duty looks pretty crisp on the next generation of consoles right now in terms of Call of Duty Ghosts, but I hope that they kind of, try to make them a lot better in the future, because I don't think I can run on this really old engine anymore. It's just kind of getting old for me. It's feeling stale now, and it took me 6 years to finally feel that way. But I guess it's been 6 years now, and I'm getting really sick of the limitations that the Call of Duty engine has. So hopefully Activision will stop being really annoying and hopefully develop a new engine so that the next Treyarch game can really impress me in terms of visuals and still be able to run at that smooth 60 frames per second. But I'm not going to say anything about skill, because I don't think that there's a lot of skill involved in any video game. I do feel like the skill gap in Battlefield 4 is slightly larger than it is in Ghost, because the thing is that they're both two different types of shooters and they can be compared. Don't tell me that they can't be, because they can be, and I'm doing it right now. Call of Duty Ghost is a twitch shooter, while Battlefield 4, I don't want to say is a war simulator because it's really not. It's just kind of a more realistic approach to a first-person shooter than Call of Duty is. But Call of Duty is really based on all your reflexes in your hands, hand-eye coordination, while Battlefield 4 is kind of more about placing your shots on enemies and making the right moves and whatnot and taking objectives. So they're completely different in that sense. So I kind of got sick of the Twitch shooter aspect. As of right now, I play Battlefield 4 primarily, and when I get kind of pissed at Battlefield, I go play Call of Duty Ghosts. But yeah, Battlefield 4 is awesome, and if you have a PlayStation 4, get it. If you don't get it. Or if you have an Xbox One, you should get it. Next gen, Battlefield 4 is way better than Ghosts.